The No Normies Podcast.
Welcome to the No Normies Podcast, a podcast about two friends talking about, you know,
what have you.
stuff.
Yeah.
I'm your host, Jim Allison.
I'm your host, Brad LeDuc. Let's talk about Seinfeld.
Seinfeld, a lot of fans actually wrote some scripts.
They wrote scripts and they wrote prompts, and I stumbled upon a couple prompts on Reddit, of all places. There's an entire subreddit of like modern Seinfeld scenarios. And Jim found a really interesting Seinfeld scenario that I believe a comedian and a writer came up with. I remember one of my favorite Seinfeld was The Bubble Boy. Definitely, The Bubble Boy was great. Just the two stories coming together with both George and Jerry in the separate cars and then getting separated.
Yeah, it was a really funny episode. If I remember, in that episode, George, I guess he gets in like a fight with the Bubble Boy playing
Trivial Pursuit.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the Bubble Boy's just an asshole
the whole time. So he's a dick, and you want something. You kind of don't want anything good to happen to the Bubble Boy.
Yeah. Do you remember one you like?
Yeah, one that really pops out to me, dude, is like the episode where I believe Kramer switches places with Jerry in their apartment complex because Kramer is like near a giant red sign from a restaurant. So this red sign is like driving him crazy. He can't sleep. Jerry's nice enough to switch places with him. And then what happens is slowly they switch personas. So Kramer becomes laid back. Jerry becomes like unhinged, and he begins to like shake and act just like Kramer. And I remember there's a puppet. There's like a weird little puppet in Kramer's apartment called Mr. Marbles. And there's a scene while he's sleeping in the red. You see like the red hang his face in bed, and you hear like footsteps, like, and he goes, "Mr. Marbles." Like that made me laugh so hard. That was a great episode. Yeah, I mean, what else? What are some other episodes that you can think of? Oh, the contest.
The contest. What it won an Emmy when all four of them made the bet that who could go the longest without like masturbating.
Mm-hmm. And for prime time, that's pretty impressive,
especially back in the '90s to get that by the censors and make it super funny. Mm-hmm. And yeah, Larry David was top form that day. Yeah.
So I just realized there might be some. I doubt it, but there might be some people out there who doesn't know what Seinfeld is, which would be super surprising. But if you don't know, it's a show about nothing. That's basically the joke about it, and that's true. It's a show about nothing, created by Jerry Seinfeld and co-created by Larry David from the show Curb Your Enthusiasm. I think Seinfeld started probably 1989 to 1998 on the Fox channel. Mm-hmm. I think, yeah. I'd be surprised if you never seen Seinfeld, because it ruled the airwaves for a long time
and inspired pretty much all comedy writers in all sorts of genres, just from cartoons all the way up to film, with different ideas and prompts, and it just really laid a bedrock for American comedy.
Yeah, and if you want to, I know that right now another thing that should be giving us money right now, but Hulu. If you sign up, you can actually watch the whole season on Hulu of Seinfeld. I know it's one of those shows that, like, my dad would probably go to work and talk around the water cooler about it with some friends.
Yeah.
Like, it's just something like, you see the episode that so-and-so and George, the concepts in the writing were so different and weird. And the cast was great, too. Who's George played by? That's,
played by Jason Alexander. I know he's back working on Broadway right now.
That's right. Yeah. So he was classically trained, I think, before he got this.
Yes.
And Kramer...
Michael Richards.
Damn, see, I knew it. Just got to poke the bear. It's going to work. He was, we saw him on Weird Al, right? He was on a Weird Al movie.
Yeah, VH1.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was a long time before he got it's a super young Michael Richards in that one.
Yeah.
But another buzzworthy movie to see, nonetheless.
I heard he's most recently known for the N-word. Anyways, so... There's Elaine, who's played by
Julia Louis-Dreyfus.
Damn, you good. Yeah, and she's on Veep, right?
Yep.
I think Veep's the most recent project she's on.
Yeah, and pretty fucking funny, too.
Yeah, that's a good show. And Jerry Seinfeld is making that Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee.
Yep.
And that's doing pretty well. It's on the Crackle channel. I think Jerry, out of all of them, made the most money, of course, because it was his baby.
I mean, really, any of them, aside from Michael Richards, could write their own ticket.
It's a shame. It's a shame.
Just from what they've done and what they've achieved in just stand-up in sitcoms. So here's some writing prompts of modern Seinfeld.
Mm-hmm.
Up-to-date pop culture, and like thrown it at Seinfeld, and I think it just works so well.
So if the show still existed.
Yeah.
Okay, I see. Cool.
If it's still going on right now. Okay, here's one. Jerry wants to break it off with his latest fling when she wears Crocs on their third date. George is given a Fitbit by his mother and pays a high school track runner to wear it all day.
That's good.
Kramer and Elaine both think an attractive female Uber driver is flirting with one of them. I mean, that's like 3 or 4 huge things that everyone can relate to.
And I can definitely see that as a Seinfeld episode. You don't have to think hard about it. It's like, I could see that. I could see those characters doing that.
It falls in so well. Here's another one. George starts using the women's bathroom at work because it's much nicer. His coworkers praise him for his bravery, and his unwittingly becomes a hero in the transgender movement.
Wait, what was that one? Sorry, say that again. He became a hero.
Yeah, George starts using the women's bathroom, and basically everyone finds out and they praise him for his honesty and his heroism for coming out as a transgender.
That's great. I love that one. That's
and
great.
you can just see angry little George just like, I'm not a transgender.
Yeah. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, just fumbling over everything.
Mm-hmm.
Frustrated that he can never find a Share a Coke bottle with his name on it, Kramer begins to sell black market Coke bottles with uncommon names on the street. Unbeknownst to him, Coca-Cola finds out and he is arrested. George becomes addicted to pumpkin spice everything.
That's
Jerry, it's a pumpkin spice. I can't.
Pumpkin spice?
I want to wear Ugg boots, and I want to get something with a very spicy fall drink.
Yada, yada, yada. I went to Starbucks and look at this, Jerry.
Master my domain.
That's good.
How about this one? Jerry gets Netflix. His girlfriend expects him to give her own profile. George acts nice to Jerry to get a profile. Kramer uses his profile to open an illegal theater. Elaine tries to convince everyone that Hulu is better.
That's great. I kind of really wish to see the episode. I wish that existed.
It would totally fall in, and like Kramer would just show the weirdest shit, probably.
Yeah,
like golf documentaries, or just like documentaries on just probably doll documentaries on like smoked fish and like pipes. Yeah,
Dreams of Sushi, that documentary.
Oh,
he would show that a bunch of times.
Oh, totally. He would like making like smoked fish in the back of the auditorium just to like sell.
God, and the best thing about these, I love how the show's been on for such a long time that I think people. It's so easy for people to come up with these concepts because we already have these characters built. They're complete. We know how they act. They know what they would do in different situations. But I love it. I love it. So those are all fans. That's awesome.
I think all fans made these, and it just like you said, the pieces just fit. You just have to set up the scene, and it would just write itself. Really.
Yeah.
One more. I think I really love this one was It reminds me, Kramer and Newman become addicted to Pokemon Go. Jerry is annoyed that so many adults are playing a children's game. He gets even more annoyed when his apartment becomes a hot spot for catching rare Pokemon.
That's good.
And Kramer begins charging people to use Jerry's apartment to catch Pokemon.
That's really good. That's really
so,
great.
That would so work.
Oh my god.
Oh my god, that would work so well. Yeah.
Giddy up. Pikachu, giddy up.
It's a rare Bulbasaur, Jerry.
Jerry! Newman. Bulbasaur. Yeah. So, I mean, with that said, drum roll. So after Brad told me about all these spec scripts that were happening, it just so happened that on a lot of websites, all of a sudden this thing popped up. It was called Seinfeld and the Two Towers. And I looked into it, and it's a spec script that a comedian wrote about 9/11 in the Seinfeld universe.
Yeah, and it gave me pause because 9/11, you're always just like, oh, that's something you can't touch. Yeah, in comedy, yeah, you can't.
It's a tough one. I grew up on the East Coast, and it was definitely like I'm from Massachusetts, so it's a couple hours away, and it was just a very weird It was a weird day
Yeah.
for everybody. I mean, you guys definitely felt it over here, too.
Yeah, but I think Seinfeld just being just a staple of New York City, that would be a great episode, too, just because, I mean, it would affect his characters.
It's the home. They're probably like, in that universe, in that world, you can see that like, Monk's Cafe being a couple blocks away from the Twin Towers.
Is it?
So maybe. Let's probably...
Let's assume. Yeah.
Let's assume. But this comedian, Billy Dominu, I hope I'm saying that correctly.
Billy Dominu.
He wrote the script as, I guess, a lark. He just decided to go for it. I read through it. It's around 30 pages, so it's like one episode. Mm-hmm. But it is amazingly well done, well crafted. The story feels like a Seinfeld episode. But there was moments where you want to go, gross. I can't believe you just said that. But then it makes up for the joke. So we'll give you some footnotes about what happens in the script.
It's worth looking up as well, too. Seinfeld 9/11.
9/11 script. You can find it anywhere in Google. Like I found it on Slate.com. So just look around. You can find it. Actually, the PDF is available from the comedian. He has like a Google Drive download.
Yeah, it's Billy Dominu, spelled Domineau. Billy Dominu.
You can find him. But yeah, so when the script first starts, it starts with a cold open, like any Seinfeld episode, where he's doing stand-up. He's talking in front of a crowd, and he just so happens to talk about. I think the joke was so many people have died. It's a normal thing. He's just talking nonchalantly, like people have died. There's a huge line for the gates of heaven, and he just jokes about how they have to wait and they have to read magazines because they're waiting so long for the gate to open up. They could have been in hell by now, and that's the cold open. And then it goes, the next scene is they're in the Monk's Cafe. Elaine, everyone's there. Elaine's there. George is there. I think Kramer's about to run in. Elaine's talking about how one of her boyfriends that she met, died in the Twin Towers. And they're having just a very basic conversation about how she thought it wasn't going anywhere. So in a way, she's happy that he was in the towers, which is really fucked up.
You could think it's just Seinfeld giving one of those eyebrow raise. Oh, really?
Yeah, really. And
Elaine is just justifying it to him across the table.
Exactly. Kramer, I think, pops in. This was genius. I thought this was because, of course, Kramer would be involved somehow.
Of course.
Kramer pops in. He says, "Hey guys, do you remember my neighbor?" And this neighbor happened to be from the Middle East. He says he lent that guy a box cutter.
Oh, no.
He lent him a box cutter, and then there's this whole conversation about how, like, Kramer, your friend, used that box cutter to kill one of the pilots. And then, of course, in Kramer's mind, he thinks this is ridiculous, and he wants to get his box cutter back.
Of course,
he just talks about getting his box cutter back.
He's incensed by this.
He thinks he feels like he's the victim.
Yeah.
After all these deaths. And then there's these side characters where in the diner, it's one of those things where, like in a lot of Seinfeld episodes, he gets in fights with the locals, and it seems that there's dust from the towers on his sandwich, and this whole conversation about, like, there's dust on my sandwich. And he walks up to the diner, and I think he wants a new sandwich, and this character, Larry, there's his line where Larry says, thinks he's too good for this dust. That dust is America. And then George, this is the main backbone of this episode. George is walking out of the cafe. George runs into someone, knocks this woman over, and grabs her before she falls. This woman claims that the way that George saved her from falling down, he feels like the same person who dragged her out of the tower. She's one of the survivors.
Like she feels the memory of his grip on her.
So she automatically thinks like, oh, this is the guy that saved us from the towers.
And she's just all in with this idea.
And George, being George, of course, he thinks this is an opportunity, and he uses it.
Yeah. Yes, I am.
Yes, he is. He says, yes, I am. I am the hero. This is me. It's me. I saved you.
Yeah.
So after that, the woman thinks he's the hero, and Kramer, I remember the next scene, Kramer he goes to a government building to get to a claims administrator to get refunded for like $20 for the box cutter.
Uh-huh.
And he explains like, my neighbor Mohammed Atta had my box cutter, and this whole office, the government officials all turn on him and say, you helped the terrorist, you did it, and they kick him out basically, or he runs out. So yeah, and then George goes to a survivors meeting. Everyone thanks George. He becomes a hero in front of their eyes too. At Ground Zero, Jerry's is dating someone. He falls in love with someone as he volunteers at Ground Zero. They're about to kiss at Ground Zero. They're about to split up and like go their separate ways for the night. Another Seinfeld moment where he leans in to give her a kiss, and there's dust on her teeth. So of course Jerry doesn't want to kiss her,
And so she just like kisses his cheek or something.
Yeah, there's that kind of like off-put of like,
oh, thanks. Yeah, love you too.
love you too. Newman shows up at the at a hardware store where Kramer is, and he says he has all these packages that were supposed to be delivered to the Twin Towers, but since the towers crashed and everything, he has these free presents, as he calls it, gifts.
Oh no!
He gives Kramer one, and the best callback ever was Kramer can't open the package because he doesn't have his box cutter.
Oh, that's so.
It's so dark.
So good.
It's so dark and brilliant. It's brilliant callback.
I could totally see that being like a commercial break right there.
And then it goes to George is back in the support group. George comforts and hugs a bunch of the tearful survivors. So he's really giving into this whole charade. And people are just loving him to death. And they gave him this sash that reads NYC's greatest hero. And so he's wearing it.
Oh.
And there's a Seinfeld-like montage of him walking down the street, and people are giving like free coffee, free hot dogs, high fives.
I could just imagine like the Godfather 2 when like Vito is walking down the street and
Yeah.
he's like, oh, here's some oranges for you, Vito Corleone.
And Elaine thought, she thought that one of her the boyfriend was dead.
Yeah.
But now she finds out the boyfriend's alive, goes to the hospital, and Elaine was about to break up with him right in that room. The TV shows an image of George, and he goes, "That's the guy that saved me. That's the guy I said never to give up. You know what? This is fate. We're supposed to be together. Will you marry me?" And basically, he proposes to Elaine, all because of George. And so this whole thing is terrible for Elaine because you want to break up with him. George is having a great life. He ends up in bed with one of the widows of one of the victims in the towers, a guy, and she starts crying in bed. And then George pulls a very George moment where he goes like, "This is what your husband want. This is what your husband will want. You're with me now. I know he wants you to be happy."
Oh, just really laying the sleaze on. Oh no!
Yeah, it's like I think Jerry's the only one in the group that knows that he's lying about it.
Yeah,
but for some reason, I'm pretty sure in other episodes, Jerry just kept his mouth shut about certain stuff. He probably thought it was terrible.
He's kind of being his conscience on George's shoulder.
Yeah, and so Elaine comes to think that George did save Brian, and Elaine's now really pissed off at George. But George doesn't want to say anything because he wants to keep this lie going.
Yeah.
Another scene, Kramer tries to make conversation with a hardware store employee and try to get a discount on a box cutter. So he explains what happens. There's a jump cut where he ends up outside of the store getting thrown out. So he's getting thrown into a pile of trash. There's a scene where Jerry's trying to get his first responder clothing washed because, there's a lot of asbestos and junk and trash in the air from the buildings. And so he's going to a dry cleaning service, and he takes off the clothing, puts it in a pile, and then all these other first day responders throw their dirty clothes on top of his dirty clothes. In a very, you know how like the city's always somehow against them in a way? And so these people are like bumping into him. He's like, you can imagine the laugh track going off when he's getting pushed around.
Yeah, just trying to avoid as much dust as he can.
And this is great. Steinbrenner pops up.
Steinbrenner?
Steinbrenner. He shows up. He's praising George in the office, of course. Like, it's all because of you. We're going to make so much money. We should make T-shirts. The gang then meets up at Monk's Cafe again. George tells the whole group that Mayor Giuliani is holding a gala, an event for the heroes of 9/11.
And he's going to be honored?
He's going to be honored, at this event. And so Kramer pops in around that time, and he has a blowhorn. He's got a speaker. He's protesting, but what he's protesting is he's saying that the government planned 9/11. So that ties into all the or it might have been, but like he's basically protesting this, and he says that he's the real victim. Cut to Costanza's living room. The parents are saying congratulations and everything like that. His dad thinks it'd be really great if the city, now that his son's a hero, the city can pay for all the parking tickets. And so, which you can see happening. You can see the father trying to milk this, just like George is milking everything. They came up with a great. I was feeling like this didn't have a lot of Seinfeld moments in it, but Jerry goes to a spa because he's covered in dust. He wants to have a detox. He wants to be clean, completely clean.
Right.
And so he goes there. He meets the masseuse. The masseuse is telling him that we have new technique to clean you. And he mentioned something about like a mud mask, and he's like, mud mask? Okay, what's that made of? And then she explains that the mud from the mud mask is all it's all mud from the Hudson River. So there's just when the masseuse like leaves the room, he gets up and tries to run out of the office. So he runs out into the street in this white robe, and since the streets are still dirty, he's getting covered with dirt and mud, and he's looking gross. And he's in this big robe, and it goes over his head. And of course, like this kind of makes sense. People coming out of buildings think it's a terrorist, so they're all because paranoia around that time, guys, was super bad. People blamed if you didn't look white or American or whatever. People would get blamed a lot most of the time. This is a sad fact.
And they just like chase him down the street or something?
Chase him down the street. Then the transition happens when they all pop up at the gala, and everyone's celebrating. Brian's there, who meets George for the first time, and says like, "Thank you, because of you. It's like now I know I can marry Elaine, and everything's gonna work out."
You just see Elaine probably just giving him the most
she's
stink
still
eye.
very angry at George. George pops up on the stage. He's saying like, "Thank you, I don't deserve this. Thank you so much." This is a great way to tie every loose end up. Kramer takes out an envelope. This envelope is a great catalyst for this moment because he opens it because it was the gift.
Where did he get the envelope? Was from
it
Newman,
was from
right?
Newman.
One of
yeah.
the gifts.
He wants one of the gifts. He's like, well, I guess I can open this. He opens it, and wouldn't you guess it? White powder pops out of the envelope. So he's covering the whole anthrax moment.
Yeah.
The dust comes out, hits Jerry. Jerry's like, what is this? Get this off me. He falls back on the stage where George is, accepting his awards and all that and all the glory. The dust falls onto George. George has a reaction to it and starts sneezing. And of course, the people who he saved claim that doesn't sound like their hero. Because when the towers were collapsing, they couldn't see the hero. They could only hear him make noises, and so that's all they were working off of. Was his touch and his noise. So they say, "You're a phony! You're a phony!" And they all get up and they chase after him off the stage. And to wrap it up perfectly, Elaine takes another big sip of her wine and removes her ring, placing it in front of Brian. Elaine then says, "Maybe it wasn't exactly fate." And that's it. That's the whole 9/11 script.
That is a perfect script. I mean, that would so work.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is really well crafted. That writer was great. And if you, go take a look at it. We left out a couple of the jokes and sight gags.
But there's definitely a lot of details and jokes that you're missing out, like Brad said.
Yeah, it's really a good tribute.
I mean, and to tell you the truth, I'm glad I'm seeing this in script form because I feel like 9 seasons of Seinfeld was enough, you know?
Yeah, but I could totally see, now that they're older, I could totally see someone doing an animated version of this.
Oh,
and
yeah.
The voices would work so well, and I think they could totally do this. That would be like, I could totally see that on Adult Swim or something like that.
You never know. I mean, Larry David somehow brought back Seinfeld for Curb Your Enthusiasm in a couple episodes.
Yeah.
They did that, so maybe this is something that might get to Seinfeld. You never know. I really doubt he would do it, him being a New Yorker, but maybe because he's a New Yorker, who knows, maybe that will have more of appeal to him. You never know.
You never know. Hold out hope. I mean, and with Seinfeld, you'll never forget.
Ciao